we are here. We are sitting outside the Chandler's pub in Trafalgar Square. We've just watched between us, I think, several hours of Olaf Nicolai's German conceptual artist Olaf Nicolai's.
4 hours.
Yes, Daniel has watched 7 hours.
Yeah, I
Olaf Nicolai's Marx, a 24-hour screening
of which I've watched
Marx's
4.
Head in Chemnitz.
I've done 5.
Chemnitz.
You've done what?
George has done 5 hours of the film.
Did you just walk out?
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back in. Yeah. Continue, please.
It's a dip in and out situation. We're here with Daniel.
It's not a dip in and out situation.
We're here with
a coitus interruptus
friend of the pod, Ralph, myself.
Can I make clear that I watched
George
4
MacBeth
hours
is in
straight
Munich.
while George has been dipping in and out for the last 5 hours? I had a 20-minute break at one point.
I have not been entirely dipping in and out.
Yeah, a 20-minute break at one point. I went 4 hours straight without any kind of... So maybe we're equivalent, but I feel like my endurance trumps his dilettantism.
Come on, housekeeping. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a round robin first of all. I'm going to shoot it over to Matthew Turner. He's taking a sip of beer at the moment. Tell us first reactions to this film.
Long.
That's it. It's a long film, ladies and gentlemen. George, over in Munich.
I mean, I had many epiphanies watching this, and there may be more still to come. So I don't want to.
Well, you're on a podcast. The point is, you're supposed to share your
I understand
opinions and
that, but I
thoughts
think
about.
I haven't even reached.
You haven't processed it yet.
Exactly.
Okay, let's continue. Daniel, kind of first initial take, first immediate screening feelings.
I think it's a great work of art.
I think it's the best film of the year by far.
It's the only film you've seen this year.
No, I saw... And it's in the cinema, yes. It's the first one I've seen in the cinema since March 2020. It's the first... It's my first post.
Did you just go off it or something? What was
no, there was a pandemic, and then I didn't get around to seeing the film in the cinema.
Do you know anything about this pandemic?
I've been to the cinema loads. Okay, yeah.
So let's just set the scene.
You didn't ask me for my initial thoughts.
I know your initial thoughts. You hate it. I'm excluding you, but tell me anyway. Go on. Give me your hot take.
No, I found it quite engaging actually. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Proved you wrong.
Yeah. No, it was boring, but it was funny because someone had a go at us in the cinema, and that made me laugh a lot.
For what?
For talking.
You guys were in seats, were you?
Yeah. We were in cinema 2 in the ICA.
Yeah, and there was one guy. We started chatting at one point, and one guy was like, "Some people want to watch it like a normal film." Very angry. Maybe some people want to watch it like a normal film. He was very angry, agitated. His voice was very irate.
That's a very good facsimile of his voice.
And then we all started giggling.
Tip for
I'm
me,
actually listening to the conversation.
This is an important point. So,
when he differentiated it from other films, it kind of spoilt it.
It's true, because I think there was a kind of invites. One of the things about this film, it's a static shot of Marx's head shot in quite a wide angle. You see no kind of contextual detail around it, but you get a lot of background noise, which is why we're sitting outside at the moment. You get a lot of hubbub. You get trap music, according to George MacBeth. You get...
okay, right. I may have misclassified the genre of this.
There was some reggaeton, there was some trap, there was some Algerian
hip-hop. There's a very brief bit of trap, which is some kind of trap.
Trappish.
Trap song.
It's just a trap song. There's some, basically you pick up this kind of ambient, synchronized sound with the film. You can't see its necessary location. You can kind of get a sense in stereo of where it's coming from. There is life kind of in this square. But I think, George, you know a bit more about the actual physical situation of this sculpture, this statue actually. And sculpture and statue are an important differentiator, I guess, but you know about
the
statue, right?
The guy who did it also did Trep Tower Park, which if anybody has seen is the most extraordinary kind of remaining bit of Soviet bloc iconography in Germany. But also it's kind of interesting because it's like this spot in Chemnitz was a flashpoint ahead of those kind of crazy fascist riots that happened in 2018 there, because it became a sort of, having been a bit of a desiccated zone after the post-communist epoch, it suddenly was revitalized again when you had an enormous influx of refugees to Germany in 2015 and onwards. And so it's a place where, as you can hear in the kind of ambient soundtrack, like recent Syrian and Afghan arrivals in Germany are kind of hanging out in the evening, which is also a feature of a lot of East German cities across the thing, because you have a kind of aging population where all the young German people have kind of left these cities, and then suddenly you have an influx of young people who are kind of the type of people who would be hanging out in a public space in the evening. And so that is, and as far as I can surmise from this guy, Olaf Nicolai's other work, he's very interested in this, this dynamic of these post-socialist remnants surrounded by the kind of nasery of late capitalism or whatever. But I can't speak more about that because I haven't seen much of it. But I mean, did you guys see the footage of the kind of protests in Chemnitz and all the rest of it? They were pretty crazy. They were like, everyone was saluting. It was, it was way more extreme than Charlottesville.
Didn't he do like a boot, like a or a running shoe, a massive running shoe in a gallery?
He's quite interested in like.
Oh my god, there are fucking mice in the gallery. Sorry.
But, I mean,
Jesus.
yeah, I mean the most significant two works he's done to this work, I guess, are he did a work called Lenin 8 Square Meters, where he based on the idea of Lenin that everyone gets 8 square meters in a communist state.
8.5.
8.5 square meters. Yeah. He filled the he filled a room full of he filled a room with this like sequin rug, which was made of like, I think a Dior dresses or something, and then had a label on it that said Lenin. So that was like, I guess, kind of a comment on capitalism and communism somehow. And then he also there was a he made a work called The Flame of Revolution, where he like reproduced this Soviet monument, GDR monument from some town, I'm not sure which one, which was like a flame, and then he reproduced it in the gallery and put it on its side, and the idea was, the revolution is resting, or something,
Okay.
So he's like basically a pretty bad conceptual artist, historically.
This is what I was going to say.
And he's like because his dad, his brother is Alvin right? So he's like the less talented brother of
the ambient musician.
Imagine the awkwardness at Christmas.
Carsten
like,
Nicolai.
What have you done this year?
I love that when famous siblings don't take the same surname, just to distinguish themselves.
I think that we name dropped Kluge earlier. Kind of this obsession with Germans and maybe Eastern Europeans to an extent on contemplating the ruins of the communist, the Nazi, the kind of capitalist recent past. This is basically what it is. This is a contemplation of ruins. There's not much to differentiate it from like the ruin contemplation of 17th and 18th century Europe, right? The difference here is there are these kind of really stark contradictions, which is partly the diegetic sound of these recent arrivals and migrants listening to kind of quite alien sounding pop music,
But that is like a small part of the film. Like,
it's a very small part.
In my experience, in Owen and Ralph's experience of the film, that was a large, dominant part of the film.
It overrode my ability to enjoy it conceptually.
I was watching it since 4:30, and that actually just annoyed me. Like, it didn't have any kind of conceptual significance for me. It just annoyed me.
I'm not saying it's good.
Yeah, no, but it just annoyed me. Like,
but doesn't everything have a conceptual significance if it happens in space? I mean, the concept is you just watch this statue where it is.
Yeah. But like,
happens to happen in the background is important to the
comes into the foreground.
I guess so. But what I'm saying in terms of
it totally is. It is insofar as it's been made after 2018, and like this space is very coded.
Sorry guys, you have enough now. Okay, at 9:30 we start taking the things.
Okay.
From
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Someone just told us we have another half hour.
But okay,
that
all right.
should be
So
enough
I
time
like
to-
that. Those are imposing their own constraints.
No, I
on
think
podcast form,
formally there's some interesting considerations when you consider it as a piece of durational cinema. When I said to Daniel, when I kind of sat down earlier, one of the interesting things about statues is, unlike sculptures, they are not designed to be looked at. They project soft power. They are kind of sites of memory that aren't really physically considered. So this is a kind of unusual amount of time to spend looking at a monument, because the point of a monument is not to be looked at, it is to be physically there. And by turning a camera...
I actually read quite a good fragment from Robert Musil about this recently, when he's talking about all the kind of like statues that are throughout Vienna and the kind of like, the Habsburg era, and he kind of spent an afternoon going around and sitting in front of them for an incredibly long time and trying to see if they solicited any feelings. So he's basically reenacting what we've just, done in miniature.
There's something like there's like Anti-Perekian, right? Because if Perek is kind of
true,
on the tube, I was reading Perek's piece where he goes back to the street he grew up on, and he goes back for an hour a year, same time for an hour every year and kind of observes the street, and he kind of lists what the shops are like and what's kind of happening.
So this is the attempt to exhaust a place in
no,
Paris.
this is a different one, because this is not one
okay.
moment. This is duration. It's like he goes back for 1 hour once a year at the same time on the same day on a Thursday afternoon at 4 p.m. And sort of like he's actively observing, and this film isn't an act of actively observing. It's quite a passive looking.
I was going to mention this because I mean, obviously, the main precedent here is Empire, as far as I could see.
Actually, yeah.
But then it might be interesting to like draw out in our remaining 20 minutes the discontinuities, where that breaks off. Obviously, no sync sound for one thing, but then the other would be the changing of the reels, which is like not happening here, is it?
Some sirens have just appeared in a similar fashion to how they do in Marx by Olaf Nicolai, which we're discussing.
There is the bleed over.
I quite enjoyed how the music, the trap, some people are calling it, the music that was being played stopped very abruptly when the sirens arrived, and then that's mine, yeah. We're talking about red wine glasses.
There was some inaction of power in the film. You can imply that. Yeah, the sirens arrived, the guys turned their music off, and then the music seemed to be a bit further away. There was some kind of little subtle power dynamics going on. I don't know if I'm projecting too much into it.
I want to talk about it in terms of slow cinema, because this is a discussion that we had before, and it's far more interesting than this discussion. So, like, about the idea that. So there's two traditions of kind of slow cinema, right? There is the slow cinema, the art house slow cinema of like Lab Diaz, Pedro Costa, etc., etc. And
James
then there is
James.
And then there's the slow cinema, which is like this, which is when we discussed it before, I thought that it was not meant to be. My conception was it was not meant to be watched. Like it existed and it was fundamentally different from slow cinema, because a film like my paradigmatic example was Empire by Andy Warhol, the 8-hour film by Andy Warhol, was that no one was expected to watch the whole thing. But I just sat through 4 hours of this, which is as long as any fucking piece of slow cinema. So in experiential terms, I just experienced it, right? So I don't know. I think that.
I mean, what do you think that added or detracted from the experience? Because I did my 20-minute interval, and I'll tell you why. Because I was thinking, I can either sit here and, because I arrived earlier, and I knew the sunset, or the sun was going to slowly bleach over, and then we were going to have the street lights would be turned on, and then it becomes this kind of fairly monotonous visual experience, which is what you have, I imagine, now for the next 6-7 hours. And I knew that this would be the one event, like basically when the lights get turned on in Empire, and so I thought, if I leave and I come back, I'll be creating my own jump cut of my body, Like, I am basically the editing booth.
But I think that in those, like, I think that because I was watching, because you texted us about this, because obviously it wasn't shown simultaneously, it was shown in every country from midday, right? So when you texted us about the sunset, we were like, what the fuck? There's been no sunset.
True.
Yeah. And then when the sunset actually happened, it was an incredible anticlimax for me anyway, and I think also for Owen. Yeah. And for me, I had far more epiphanies from this kind of autonomous experience of reaching a level of boredom, or a level of kind of I don't know, just like detachment from the image of Marx as Marx, and I started just exploring the contours and imagining the visceral feeling of the rock,
which is something that doesn't happen in slow cinema, because slow cinema, even when it is relatively narrative-less, the very existence of a narrative creates a kind of tension and the possibility of boredom. I didn't find myself bored really at any point in this film.
No, because the level of visual information is actually quite rich.
Very rich, yeah.
Because of all of the contouring and like the bronze surface and like these quite dramatic almost palette knife like strikes that you have throughout his face and all the rest of it.
It's not like when you're watching a Lav Diaz film and you feel like you've been there for 3 hours, you're bored as fuck, and you'll realise you've been like 47 minutes in.
Why?
True.
I think partly because there is the implication of narrative. Kind of, when a narrative exists, you're expecting it to resolve itself in certain ways.
Yeah, because I love Pedro Costa so much, but this film felt way less like pulling teeth than Pedro Costa. It's like an endurance test, and you reach these epiphanies, right? This was just, I enjoyed the whole thing. I didn't. I
every
didn't
moment was
really
the
get
same
bored.
but different.
Yeah, I only stopped watching it because we had to do this podcast, right? I didn't really ever once get bored at all.
But that's because it was like a meditation experience.
Yes,
it was like contemplative.
That's true. It's true. What's George's? Have you just been accosted?
I was just accosted.
Did George just meet someone?
The Securitas
You were
in the Nazi building, which is actually completely roaming with mice. This building, it's insane. Mice,
you're in a kind of a Nazi necropolis, I understand.
Yeah, more or less. I feel like I'm in, the mummy.
What do you think the actual concept of this? Why
Marx?
For Olaf Nicolai, why Marx?
So I wrote down in my notebook, I was thinking, is Marx as inessential to this film as the Empire State Building is to Empire? What is the conceptual importance here? Because
the symbology
in
is
some
different.
level, he's not, because Sunday is, here's an additional level of overcoding, right? So Sunday is the German elections here for the Bundestag. And so the whole of, the whole Munich, whole of Germany right now is covered in posters and I know it's not only showing in Germany, but there's that, right? And it's the first one since these, this big fascist upsurgence in Chemnitz happened in 2018. And then there he is, he's the spectre who's haunting everybody for just one 24-hour period in a few locations throughout Germany and then the rest of Europe. Then the artist himself comes from, East Germany, grew up around these monuments, all the rest of it, and saw their loss in significance because he's in his 40s, right? So he would have seen this kind of be transfigured from something which is aligned with, the party to being just, another, like you were saying, Owen, another fairly indifferent aspect of the ambient environment which you're meant to sort of ignore or not pay attention to. So there's all these features which are suggesting that it is important, that it's Marx. But then the actual experience of concentrating on it for more than 2 hours, like Dan said, it started to become this series of abstract planes and surfaces and all the rest of it. Whereby it just became, a sigil or a set of inscriptions on a surface rather than anything corresponding to an actual historical figure who had ideas and wrote books. And all
truly. They begin to I think one of the most interesting things about it is the mutability of a monument. We were talking about his expression seeming to change, which is not inherent to the stone itself. It's inherent to the play of light across his face. He goes from melancholy to shock to anger.
He was angry at first.
Yeah.
A snarl.
It's a shadow. Scowling, and it's quite interesting about. And you're aware of.
And I had a feeling that he was ventriloquizing the voices around him as well. I don't know.
You want the lips to move.
Some moments?
I felt like I felt like you were experting the lips to move a little bit. And I think one of the things is you've got this mutability of the monument to reflect. There's an expectation that what is a monument doing? Is a monument representing power, or is it with Marx? It's like Marx kind of perhaps unexpectedly anticipated a century of enormous social upheavals that he was never witness to. He is now watching the kind of the contrail or the kind of flickering of the ember of a long century of his thinking, in a way, if you want to put it in that very determinist sense. But he's completely mute and powerless. It's kind of the powerlessness of symbols, the powerlessness of statues and sort of it kind of speaks to that kind of the irony, central irony of a monument is it's pointless and powerless, even though it's kind of full of power.
I think the duration of the film does undermine the typical power that a monument has, because if you think about the typology of monuments, there's always that moment where you turn a corner and you see it and it's kind of usually larger than everything else, and I think the fact that you're looking at it for so long really undermines the power that a monument usually has. And like Owen says, it becomes much more less about focusing on the face and the monument and much more about seeing the things that reflect off it. And so earlier you spoke about capitalism, and there was a moment where I think I came in at about 6:30, and we thought that it was nighttime already, but actually it was the light reflecting off the skyscrapers next to it, these kind of symbols of commerce and capitalism and global trade and things like that. So really you're not looking at the monument itself, you're looking at the things around it.
Yes. Yeah, literally that. Yeah, the reflection, the projection of whatever is the situation around it. We ended up, I think, Googling the I think we got a reasonably good sense of what the actual square itself is like. There's a big, what seems like a contemporary to the sculpture building behind it. I don't know what's in front of it, but I presume, like all late capitalist spaces, it's probably like Marc Auger kind of time. It's probably like a pretty, like every town centre in most of Europe, I imagine. Like there's probably a Tesco,
but grimmer,
a bit grim.
Is it particularly?
Yeah, that's true.
So it was called Chemnitz, but then it was called Karl Marx.
It used to be called Karl Marx.
Karl Marx during the era of East Germany.
During the DDR,
it's still the era of East Germany, because
but when East Germany was like a delineated nation.
It's like a geographical location.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, so it was. Why was George? You know about these things. Why was this particular town in Germany called Karl Marxstadt?
I want to say because he was born there, but that might be completely
not true.
Is that wrong?
He wasn't born there. You're wrong, George.
There's always a Karl
it?
Marx. That's what's quite strange about it, because it's kind of weirdly generic as well. If you think about the amount of these statues that there must be, there's multiple Karl Marx Straße wherever you go in Germany.
But not Karl Marx.
I always thought his enormity signified that it was. It was
a big centre for the early German Communist Party in 1919. Had about 10,000 members. It was an early blossoming of that, and it's also called Chemnitz was called like the Manchester of Germany. So it was a big industrial centre, I think, for that reason.
Twinned with Manchester.
Yeah. Wikipedia.
We all know what Engels got up to in Manchester, don't we?
Oh, we know we got up in Manchester.
Yeah.
What did he get up to in Manchester?
Well, he owned a factory in shagging twins.
Yeah, no.
Didn't know that.
Do you know? Okay.
The actual condition of
bad lad. Did you catch the extraordinary moment when, like, most of the ambient speech kind of passed by me because I can't understand it, but there was a moment when this guy yelped out about half an hour before I left. He went, "Du bist mein Bruder niemals," which just means "you are no way my brother," and it was just this like, a shiver ran down my spine. You know, and I've been staring at Marx, just staring at me for however long.
Do you feel that was addressed?
Suddenly, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it shows that within the larger the catchment area of the piece is, the likelihood that it can, inscribe one moment of great profundity that kind of, shores up its basic premise is probably greater, right? Because let's say the piece is 24 hours, you're gonna get one moment which is like that. But it was crazy good. It was like it was choreographed or something.
Yeah. I think it was. I'm sure if we filmed it on a different day, that same group of lads probably wouldn't have been there.
Why did he pick this day to film it?
Well, what day was it?
I think there's some significance now. I don't know. George might know.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's the equinox, isn't it? So it's the day is as long as the night is.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right.
So, but I mean, I was also trying to overkide it.
So it's some astrology shit.
It's the passage towards October.
That's true.
It?
It's some astronomy shit.
I wish Marx was right, to be quite honest. The state of things are at the moment.
I mean, what was
tell me about it, mate. Right now.
Come on, somebody must know
Get
this.
out.
When was he born?
1947, 2008.
No,
He's a Gen
what's
Z.
His birthday?
I don't know.
No one knows. Look, is the guy a big Marx head, or is this just some kind of conceptual joke?
No, he's not. Clearly not a Marxist, because he makes films ruminating about the fall of communism.
Yeah,
so he's
just contemplating on the ideology that powered the GDR.
He's a liberal.
Wait, I guess he's liberal, but he's just like a late boomer, early Gen X artist.
Yeah,
who lived through the fall of communism. So he's got this whole thing. His whole thing is like ruminating on the fall of communismism, which is a lot of art from a generation.
Which for him is probably
Susan Buckmore's dream world catastrophe sort of shit.
For him, it's quite a formative. He like any kind of, I think, artist in the area, he is daily confronted with these kind of quite ironic monuments and relics to
Dude,
various.
I doubt he lives in Chemnitz.
He lives in Berlin.
You know,
He lives in Berlin.
I mean, the whole of Eastern Germany. I mean, like the whole of Eastern Europe.
But he's from there,
very
though.
much been
He's from there.
exposed to these.
The Marx isn't
relics,
from there,
right?
but Olaf Nicolai and Carsten Nicolai grew up in Chemnitz.
Carsten Nicolai,
Karl Marx
Apanote.
Yeah, this is his youth
they
in
grew
a
up
way.
They grew up
This
in
is his
Karl Marx
culture.
stats. Yeah, so yeah.
He's kind of been exposed to stuff.
So
It's
he-
ripe pickings
it's
if you're going to be a
formative for him.
conceptual
I guess
artist.
he
Is to
grew up-
play
yeah,
ironically of this
yeah.
stuff. Like, look at the contradictions of it. It's I guess in a way quite bait. It's not. We were trying to find like an English
The
analog.
whole
Is
film
it
is
like?
bait.
Well, I don't think the film is mate. I think the film
I don't
is.
know. I mean,
well,
the English analog would be Tacitus Dean doing all those
Yeah,
films about
that- 100%,
that's true.
right, about the Berlin monuments, like at the top of the Fernsehturm before it's shut and all the rest of it. Right?
But maybe in like an English context, is it shooting Nye Bevan's statue and like
No, it's not, because Nye Bevan is nowhere near as important as Karl Marx.
Sorry, what?
I get. Well, what kind of monumental? Because it has to be a figure who impacted upon the country in which we live, right? So I don't think there is an analog really, because the only place where you can have an analog is a place where there was a kind of an attempt to build a utopia
Because you
based on
couldn't
the ideas
photograph
of someone, and then
because we have a Marx statue in Highgate Cemetery, but
it wouldn't have the same point.
It wouldn't make it makes sense. But Germany also, I mean, East Germany had communism, but if you're going to photograph Marx for 24 hours to make a point about East Germany, then you're probably a liberal criticising how communism went in the Soviet
I don't know
Union.
about that. I mean, I think also the question is that
it's more
like,
melancholic than that.
decommunization was different in Germany because like they've been taking all these statues down in Poland and Hungary and throughout the rest of the Eastern Bloc, but they're still curiously kind of just like there in Berlin and in the rest of Germany. And in West Germany, they just put up a massive Lenin statue, and it was a whole big farrago.
I remember. Yeah. No, but that's the thing. It's not a renunciation, right? It is. That's the whole thing. He's a liberal, right? So he makes this work about, communism didn't work, but capitalism's shit as well. Like, that's his whole thing, right? So it's a kind of melancholy detachment.
It's a liberal, hauntological liberal
hauntological
kind
liberalism.
of, yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's how it struck me anyway. And when I looked at his previous work, it does feel like it's happy to kind of riff off the puns that are inherent in, or the contradictions that are inherent in having utopian objects dropped from space, as it were, in a capitalist, kind of grim capitalist environment. Like it kind of auto-generates.
I mean, I'm
its own
receptive to
meanings.
this kind of shit, though. I mean, I know it does sound bait, but like this is, it's very attuned to my sensibilities in a way, and I also don't want to burden it too much with an author, because it feels like it was an idea which is kind of like ambiently circling and waiting for somebody to come up with it.
So we were just
know what I
waiting
mean?
for someone to photograph Marx's statue for 24 hours.
Well,
that was just inevitable.
And talking of ambient film, there was an awful column in Sight and Sound recently by an English broadcaster, Jonathan Ross, in the new improved Sight and
That's
Sound.
your granddaughter!
An ardent cinephile.
The ardent cinephile. Well, he is an ardent cinephile, and he wrote a very facile provocation about how he was like I think we should have an ambient cinema, like a cinema that you can look at your phone and then look at the screen, and you don't need to concentrate that much. I don't know why. And
so was he vindicated? Because that was happening a lot where I was.
But his example was because it wasn't his revelation like triggered by watching something boring.
He was watching Carry On films.
Yeah, he was watching Carry. Or he was watching something.
It was like Stepstone and Son the movie, and then loads of Carry On films.
It was loads of
sitcoms that had been turned into movies, and that was his argument for saying that movies should just be watched as TV.
Well, no, he was
not paying attention.
He was saying there should be an analog to ambient music, right? Because he was saying like, I love Kurosawa, but I didn't look at my phone once.
But to suggest that ambient
then I
music
thought
is-
about why doesn't there an ambient film, like there's ambient music, and
But to suggest that ambient, it's a facile, stupid article.
it's a
to
stupid
suggest
article.
that ambient music is
having said that,
necessarily background music.
So that's the point I made at the time. But having said that,
in your Sight and Sound column.
in my Sight and Sound column, But having said that, I think that this film really did do that in a way that I've never really experienced before. Insofar as like I was watching it for like half an hour, 40 minutes straight without looking at my phone. And I look at my phone, and then I still feel I was experiencing the film. You know, like I don't think I missed anything.
Yeah.
And
I missed something.
pardon?
I missed the light going on. I looked at WhatsApp,
You missed the pivotal
and then they
moment.
turned the floodlights on, and I was like, "Fuck that! I just missed the only thing that
you missed the
happens
one
in
event
this whole
of the film.
fucking film."
Yeah.
I mean, the
That's why I
sirens
left
was
the
good.
cinema.
My
I didn't
favourite
want
was
to
when the
have
sirens
the
happened. That was
bake-off,
sick.
the anticlimax.
Yeah, the increasingly loud siren sounds, which seem to come closer and closer and persist, was quite an amazing, like an emergent moment. It was like an emergent cinema because, you know, everything is possible. It had this kind of presumably omnidirectional mic that was picking up a lot of shit, and we read these kind of power dynamics into it. That was kind of interesting. I like that. I like the play of light across his face.
Just 10 out of 10. Great film.
The best film of the year.
Well,
I think Annette was better.
I haven't seen Annette, and I won't see Annette. But what have I seen this year? Okay, I've seen that
You
Black.
can't just press that button. You better say like a word.
I've seen She's All That, the remake of He's All That, starring Addison Rae.
Welcome to Daniel Says Films He's Seen This year.
And that's it, I think. And this was the best one I've seen this year.
I've seen a few.
You had set yourself.
And it's one of my faves.
I'll try and do the siren.
You've set yourself up to like this film. It's almost part of proving a point.
I don't know. I didn't
But
intentionally not watch any
liking
films
this
this year. With it, but no good films came out this year. What else came out this year? I mean, I'm looking forward to the Sopranos film, but apart from that,
It
I
looks
don't know.
shit. The Sopranos film looks dog
I think it
shit.
was alright.
Well, there's the Matrix film, which looks really bad.
That looks
the Matrix
wank.
film looks amazing. The opening line in the trailer.
Matrix is shit. Man.
No.
Like whatever. Like,
You know, what about the opening line in the trailer, which is, you seem to be very triggered.
I haven't seen the trailer.
It's
Yeah. And he's like, I think I'm crazy. And then he's like, we don't use that word here.
It's amazing. And the blue pill turns out to be, I think, a
so
kind of
lame.
SSRIs, like antidepressants that he's taking to hold back the experience of the red pill. It's
I
amazing.
must have
It
seen
looks
other films
incredible.
made. What other films were made this year? I must have seen other films made
I
this year.
think all the films you've seen were 2020. Like
seen
Ham
Lot.
on Rye and stuff. That was 2019.
That was 2019, yeah. I saw that in 2020 anyway.
Basically, no films were made in 2021 apart from Marx by Olaf Nicolai, and that's why it's our favourite film of the year.
Well, it's not your favourite film. Annette's your favourite film of the year.
My favourite film is Annette's. Yeah.
Well,
Second
what about
second
First
place.
Cow? I didn't watch that either.
Oh,
But it's
that's
on
shit.
Mubi now.
No, this was better than First
The
Cow.
sound design of First Cow was good. That's what I say.
But Annette was better this because I listened to the soundtrack of Annette. I'm not going to listen to the soundtrack of this again, even though there were some reggaeton songs on it, but they weren't good ones.
Yeah, I'm not going to see Annette either. So
Why not? Why not going to see Annette?
because Holy
Waste
Motors
of
was
fucking
shit.
time. Save yourself.
Holy Motors was dog shit.
Yeah, and
Unfiltered
like,
dog
it's
shit,
better than
but
Annette.
This is better.
It's better than
Is it
Holy
as good as his early works? I don't care if it's not as good as like Lovers on the Bridge or Mavao Sang.
Oh,
Wait. I have something else I want to say about durational
Go
films.
on then.
All right, so I mean, this is like a weird serendipitous moment. I was reading this Epstein book that I bought in Foyleys, The Intelligence of a
John
Machine.
Epstein.
John Epstein, not Jeffrey, but
How's your
if
high
I could
bone?
have bought Jeffrey Epstein's.
John Epstein.
Anyway. But John Epstein, the lesser Epstein, and he is talking in it about, like, he's got this beef with Bergson, right? And Bergson hated cinema because he thought that he had a kind of like a humanist argument about duration and how it cut up duration in order to create a fictive sense of time. But that Epstein is defending this. He's saying this is exactly what cinema is about because in the pre-modern period, like mystery plays, they used to have to be exactly as long as the action they were showing was. And so I read this 2 hours before I came to see this, and how like the mystery play, if it showed you something that had happened for 2 hours, it would have to be exactly 2 hours long. So this is like the early modern play. And then some bright spark was like, no, we can have a 3-act structure which can represent the synchronicity, in stages, and then people can make up the jumps in between on their own. And so this progression towards montage and everything that Epstein reveres. And this seems to me like if I were to say there was a kind of reactionary impulse behind this genre of film reception, it would be in that mode, in the sense that we no longer have faith in the kind of fictive time of cinema and the ability of cinema to create its own temporality. We need some kind of
But the fictive time of cinema has been criticised for a long
mad
time,
verisimilitude,
surely.
whereby it's showing
From
complete synchronicity around 6 cities or 7 cities of the world at the exact same time. And
But that's just like akin to the Brechtian argument against illusionism, right? That's been going on since the 50s, certainly since the late 60s.
Of course.
Yeah,
But I just think that this is the hyperbolization of something you get don't get me wrong, I do rate it very highly and I enjoyed it a lot as an aesthetic experience. But I do think it's answering the same need, albeit maybe in an art world context, of something like Birdman, or one of these one-shot wonders.
This is interesting.
Like
this is interesting. You say
one
this
of those.
because the one before these cunts turned up, the one conversation I had in the screening was this woman with this old lady was behind me. And everyone's been quite reverent at this point. It hadn't degenerated into the raucous, chaos.
You were a prime suspect in the
anyway. And she's this really links to what George was saying. In this idea, this kind of like spectacle sense of it. And she was like, "Does anything happen in this? Because I know it's one take, but one take can move, right?" So she was expecting some kind of like some kind of spectacular one take. I don't know what she expected. Some kind of like
the camera moving around the statue, panning around it,
maybe showing what was going on. And so you felt this kind of synchronicity. So I think in a way it's kind of like a really great fuck you to that kind of spectacle.
The expectation
the spectacle of synchronicity and stuff.
True, it definitely frustrates.
I think it maybe
it's so uncompromising, right? It's so uncompromising.
Because it's so close.
No, and that's what I rate.
But what if the shot had like a few corners on the edge of like the sky?
I think that would be too much.
That would have broken it. That would have broken the concept.
Too much to people. I think
it had to just be the light on the stone.
His face needs to fill the frame
and also the diegetic sound didn't give you enough either. Like the diegetic sound was like, you had some kind of way of discerning some kind of narrative, whatever. I know you did, but not really. Like not really. It was just like.
Well, it seems to like if you trace it right back to the roots of like early film, it doesn't really share anything with. It shares, if anything, like the proximity to something like Méliès, because you've got this idea of a contained spectacle. The very early.
Your gear, lads.
Thanks.
You okay?
The very earliest.
Okay.
What are you saying?
You need help with your gear.
Oh yes, right. Yeah.
Where we are.
Okay. Cheers, man. Thanks. We don't need.
Any big taxis come past or anything? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
We're going to wrap up soon. Owen, finish your point.
When you look at Méliès and you look at his kind of spectacle fairy films, the very earliest of those films they were a contained, repetitive scenario that kind of unplayed. Méliès, yeah, sorry, I should say Méliès, but they kind of unfolded within this kind of contained frame of the scene. And if anything, it had more. It was more related to that than any kind of montage. It was like this almost anti-montage film.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. It's an
attempt.
It's an attempt to kind of wipe the slate of. Right, like post-Eisensteinian or whatever.
We've just been given our fuck off orders.
We're just going to go inside. We're going to go inside.
I've got before I sign off. There is the capstone. I don't know if you guys picked up a little bit of art speed.
Yeah, we're just going inside. Yeah.
No, we don't have to continue up.
We can sit inside.
Should we set up inside? Say again? Should we set up inside?
Okay, George, you've got to go, haven't you?
I think I'm going to go, yeah.
Okay, maybe we should wrap up then.
Let's wrap up. Let's wrap up. Thank
So
you very much, George, for joining us
the
for
film
Marx.
ends with a quote from the Danish poet Inga Christensen,
Yeah,
right? So this relates to Daniel's point of whether or not this is actually an uncompromising film. Maybe this is a final compromise, I think. So it ends with a literary quote. It says, "Nobody knows, in spite of everything, whether the universe is counting backwards while we count faithfully forward." That's what it says.
Yeah.
But none of us are probably going to make it as far to actually see that on the screen.
No, I think we need to say...
Throw it in the ring.
Oh, gee, I can't believe you said that.
Exactly. Wait, let me say some German swears.
I just got my headphones off. I didn't hear what's George chatting about now?
I was just going to say some German swears. It's fine.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for listening. We've had a great time. Please, if you get the chance to watch Marx, watch it for half an hour.
I am. This is my seventh appearance on MooTube. I want to point out.
Literally, no one was counting.
I was. I am the most regular guest. I'm kind of like that guest, that gets put in the main credits because everyone's such a fan, so they have to get a contract. They have to get a contract.
Introducing Daniel Neofetou.
And featuring, like those
Psychic Simon.
We're just waiting for you to start your own podcast.
Okay, peace out, everyone. Good night.
Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye.